What's up, guys? Thanks for checking out this episode of Revealed. The last couple of episodes, we've been showing you these screens that we've been working on. We've been calling them the bubble screens, and they are complete. They're on this cart right here. We're getting ready to wrap them up and send them out to finish. But before I do that, let me walk you through the process a little bit deeper and show you some of the other features. In the last episode, we showed you all about how we edge banded this. And by we, I mean Ian. Ian spent a lot of time edge banding every single one of these holes. There's 710 to be exact, if you guys were counting. But we have actually changed that method since the last episode. We were finding that it was taking just a little bit longer than we had expected. And the new method that we came up with was actually using mostly just the heat gun with a dowel and not trimming the edge banding as we went, nor were we sanding it. We actually saved that for the end. Once we had all of these holes actually edge banded, we went through with our orbital sander and just sanded over all of the edge banding, making sure that we were nice and flush with our panels. Now, that gets a little bit difficult because we want to only give it a quick rough sand because we will be doing a final sand later on in the process. So we don't want to take that veneer down too thin and risk burning through the face of these veneers later on. From there, we were able to add all of our dominoes and lamellos into these panels. Now, all of the fasteners are hidden. You're gonna see both sides of this door. So we wanted to make this in a manner that you wouldn't see any fasteners regardless of which side you were standing on. So as you can see, we have a ton of dominoes and lamellos in these pieces on both the back edges and on the edges. Now, let me walk you through how and why that is. So here we have one of our panels. This one is one of the end panels. It has this wood strip on the edge that we're calling the frame. The center panel actually has a wood strip on either edge that overlaps the frame by about an inch, and the other end panel has the same single strip on one edge. And the reason for that, and all of the lamellos on the edges, we need to connect all three of these screens somehow without seeing any fasteners. So the way we're doing that is we're actually using the lamellos and dominoes on the edges and clamping those pieces together. The overlapping frame piece will come over our piece here by 1 inch, and we're able to then screw that piece from the back inside into our front panel. This will allow those three screens to be connected without seeing any fasteners once the back side is applied. This frame also serves another purpose. When we go to put our panel in, because there is going to be some expansion and contraction throughout the wood with the seasons, we want to add in these space balls similar to what we would do with, a standard cabinet door. So we have room for this panel to move throughout the year. This frame also continues around to the bottom where we have the same method. The center overlaps a bit and we're able to put space balls in here and keep those panels short. There's also an additional gap here on the bottom for a floor guide. This door is going to need a guide in the floor, so we have a little bit of an extra groove for that guide to ride in. At the top, as we're assembling these pieces, once we get the front three screens together, we have another strip of wood here that we're going to screw the whole way across the top. So it will also help connect those three panels. But this is something we're going to do on site when we are assembling each of these panels. And the way that the final piece, the back pieces, go on, we have to connect those three pieces together as well. The only difference there is they don't have this additional strip, but they do have all the lamellos and dominoes on the edge. So we'll connect those three. And as you can see on the back faces, we do have additional dominoes. We can go ahead and put that entire back panel right on top of here. We can go ahead and snap those together on both the outside edges and on each seam in the center, as well as with the bottom. Now the top, because it's above the track and it won't be seen, and we do want the additional security of having a mechanical fastener in there with the wheels and the weight of this track, we're able to actually go ahead and screw the panels together on the top as it's not going to be seen. Let me take you over to another bench where I can show you what we did for the wheels. So this here is the setup for our wheels. We have our wheel, right? A V-groove wheel, has the bearings in there. But we also added these bushings. A couple reasons we added the bushings. That was to help with the bolts, so that we had a bolt that fit snugly through this bearing and it wasn't loose in there. But the bushings also give us this washer on either side that will allow a little bit of additional clearance space and help prevent any friction from these wheels binding up. On the panels, we actually installed these T-nuts. So they have 4 prongs that dig into the wood so they can't spin or move, allowing us to screw these wheels right into our panel and right in place without any movement. Here's what that looks like on the back side. To achieve this, we first needed to make sure that all of our holes, our wheels, were going to be in a straight line. So after we laid out our lines, found our wheel locations, we would need to make sure that we were drilling straight through. Because we're making a series of holes that need to be very precise, we set up using a drill guide jig. This allowed us to go straight down at a perfect 90 degrees, nice and perpendicular to our panels. So we started with the pilot hole drilled all the way through each side, so we had a reference from both faces. From there, we needed to get a flat bottomed hole for this T-nut, so we just used a Forstner bit, setting the depth so that the top of this T-nut would be just below the surface of the veneer. This is going to allow us to put our panels together flush without this additional flange getting in the way. With the flat hole drilled for the flange, we needed to drill out for the barrel. Again, we swapped bits for that in our jig. And because we're drilling through the backside of this panel, we would likely blow out the face veneer. Obviously, we don't want to do. So we just clamped a sacrificial board under that so we could drill straight through, have a nice clean hole with no tear out. Now the only thing left to do was to actually insert the T-nut into our panel. Now, sure, we could have set up a block under there and used a hammer to tap these in, but they never go in straight and we risk damaging these panels. And with the amount of work that went into that, it wasn't a risk we were willing to take. We were able to use a benchtop arbor press and lift that up and hold it in place and just crank these in very easily, actually. And that gave us a secure point to then mount our wheels to. Now that completed the actual fabrication, but we still needed to assemble everything all together. So we went ahead and put all of our pieces together, connected all of our panels, dropped our acrylic panels into place, and then put that back panel on, stood this up and took a look and inspected it for any issues or imperfections. Once everything looked good, we disassembled everything and gave it a final sanding. And that's the point we're at now, where we're about to load this up into the van and get it out of here into finish. So there you guys have it, those screens in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed following this process. It was painstaking on our end, especially for Ian. I can't give enough of a shout out to him for cranking through all these holes. This was something a little bit different and a really cool project for us to take on. Now we haven't gone live in quite a while, but we're back. So stick around right now for that live segment. Thanks for watching. Drop some comments below and subscribe to our channel, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.
Let's jump right in. Last week, first of all, big shout out. Shout out to Ian for his
dedication, self-sacrifice. Did you see his hands today?
Saw his hands. Not great. He's got a little tape around his fingers. Looks like a football player. So if you have not seen that episode of Revealed, check it out. These questions are from that episode, but if you guys have questions, drop them in. We'll get them done. Looks great, but I would have used the cutout holes to measure the edge banding, taking kerf into calculation. So I think what they're meaning is the cutout from the CNC machine, They would have measured the cutout.
A couple of them behind you right there if you can reach them.
Oh, look at that. There's a cutout from the CNC machine.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that idea?
For what? To
measure.
To measure the length of the edge banding.
Yeah, to go in the inside hole of the bubble screen.
Okay. So you could do that. Can I see that? Yeah, sure. So this piece is the cutout. We're probably using a 1/4 inch bit to cut this. So you have a 1/4 inch on each side.
Yeah.
The way that we're measuring for the holes, for the length of the hole, is we're taking the actual diameter of the actual cutout. Right? The actual hole. And basically you times that by pi to get your 3.14 to get your measurement. Ian did it a little bit differently in the video. He times it by 2 and then r radius times it by 2, the radius by 2 to get, then by pi to get. So it works out to being the same number.
Either way.
But if you were to do this, you now have to find the cutoffs, which we don't have a lot of them. We have a couple of them. Right. You have to measure this, add your 1/4 inch to each side, and then times it by pi. So yes, you can do it. It's just there's an added step of having to measure.
Just added math.
Right.
Making it more complex.
Yeah. So I would also rather measure the actual piece that I'm using and not the cutoff from the piece, let's say.
So for those that don't know, there are 3 big piece, 8x4 almost?
They're 8 by 2.5.
8x2.5. And these holes were cut for stylistic purposes. And Ian tediously edge banded the inside of those holes, 700 something holes. And they're all combined into one big
Door.
office door or privacy screen or whatever. So that's what we're referring to there.
Yep.
So
I mean, both methods work for measuring it.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, I guess both methods work. I would trust measuring the actual piece more than the cutoff piece.
Right.
And it has one less step.
Right. So this is MDF, right?
Right.
So this door is made out of MDF.
Yep.
Before we get into the benefits of using MDF, this individual is understand the advantage of starting with an MDF core, but it seems like this could have been made out of solid stock much easier. So let's talk about MDF first, then why solid stock really didn't work, because there's a lot of holes in this.
So the reason we used, we're going to kind of answer both of them in one because they tie hand in hand together. So the reason we used MDF over solid stock is because this is such a large screen. It ends up being 8 feet tall by just under 8 feet wide, 8 feet wide by just under 8 feet tall. So the movement in this screen is, over time with the seasonal changes, is can be pretty great, especially if it was solid wood. So with it being MDF, we're going to get a lot less movement, which means less cupping and warping and twisting over time, causing issues with this door. It is so large, there's only so many pivot points we can have, or what's the word I'm looking for? We're tied in with the wheels on the top. We only have one point on the bottom corner to hold this door. So if it's
a lot of ability to move.
Right. So we're going to run into a lot of issues years down the road, have to service it constantly, or even have to replace it, probably with an MDF because the wood didn't work out, right? So with the MDF, it's going to stay flatter. It's going to move a hell of a lot less than the solid wood will. Yeah. Trade-off being, yes, we now have to edge band all of these interior holes. It's a lot more labor to do the MDF. Granted, there's a little bit more labor in gluing up all of the solid stock boards. We can't use things like dominoes to glue up our boards together because there's so many circles. We're going to cut the seams, right? So you risk running into a domino if you use those. So you just have to straight glue, which isn't a problem. You know, the domino's there for extra strength, but we wouldn't be able to use them in that application. And then just it being flat and straight for years to come, and weight. We're saving a lot of weight by using lightweight MDF.
Take weight off the hardware and the wheel system.
Yep.
This ties into something we've talked about a number of times. You and I have talked about, I don't know if we've talked about it on live as much. Why is there such a stigma about MDF?
Because I think a lot of people who maybe aren't in the industry, who look at things like Particleboard and MDF as being equal. Like everybody knows that Particleboard is cheap, and
this isn't Particleboard.
It's not Particleboard. Yeah. No. It's manufactured in a similar style as Particleboard, where it's wood chips and resin, right? This is just dust and resin. Sure. And there's different grades of MDF. There's different grades of HDF, things like that. Yeah. And don't want to digress too much into those. Basically, It's just how fine the particles are that these boards are being made from. Right. The finer, the better, depending on each application. Yeah. But there's this negative connotation out there that MDF is bad because it's cheap. It's not solid wood. If it gets wet, it's damaged. Things like that. And in many cases, yes, if it gets wet, it's going to be damaged. But same thing with wood. It's just wood's going to take longer to get damaged than the MDF. But if you're finishing your pieces properly, like we are, you're not going to have damage. We've used this stuff for countertops, and in bathrooms, in environments where it's going to get wet and stand up to moisture. So it really comes down to your finishing process as well. But Particleboard is much different because when that does get wet, that instantly crumbles and swells and breaks apart. Where this, you're going to have a little bit of water damage if it gets wet, but it's going to take much longer to have an issue with that. And if you actually try to buy most finer veneers already laid up on a substrate, they only come on MDF. You can't even get them on something like a plywood because it's so much flatter. You know, defects in the plywood will telegraph through into the veneer, causing issues, you know, there. So a lot of panel companies will only sell it on an MDF core.
I feel like it's one of those things that a lot of people, maybe if you're new to woodworking, like I'm asking this question as an outsider because I know you and I have talked about it. I didn't realize how much MDF is used.
Yeah.
Just because of its, I guess, versatility and its ability not to warp. And but on YouTube specifically, there is this like, I want solid wood.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, we can certainly make
you have that debate.
A kitchen of solid wood, but we're going to be coming back to service that over the years, right? And that's not to say every wood kitchen. I mean, there are ways to do it. I actually am surprised that one of the first things that I did here at NS Builders was a small vanity. It was made from, I think, hickory, maybe ash. I forget what it was. I think it was hickory, character grade. The board that we had here for me to use was already here. It was twisted and cupped and just gnarly looking. And I had to make 2 doors, so I had to resaw the veneer here in-house, not the veneer, the wood, so that I could get book-matched panels for the door. And I was like, this is, and it's, like I said, bathroom, so it's going to be in a humid environment. And I was like, there's no way that this door, I'm already starting with a really cupped piece. This vanity is going to need to be replaced. Like, these doors aren't going to last. Yeah. I see that project every so often, and the doors still look great. And it blows my mind every time that the solid hasn't warped or anything, especially considered where it started. Yeah. But it looks great. So that's not to say you can't get a great result with that, but you're leaving more at risk. Yeah. It's much more expensive. It's a lot more time consuming, things like that, which obviously can be offset, or, you know, some people are willing to pay for that, and that's fine. But we are, again, limited to what those panels are going to look like. In this case, it was only 2 doors, so I was able to resaw that lumber, get 2 book-matched panels from it, but I can't do that for a whole kitchen. Right. You know, there are ways to source the lumber directly, so you can get, you know, maybe everything cut from the same tree, but that lumber is going to be a lot thicker. Yeah. Unlike with veneer, where we can get, we could do an entire house paneling in the same exact veneer from the same tree because it's cut so much thinner.
Now this kind of ties into the shout out to Ian. This guy says, this kind of project would kill the passion in any cabinet maker. You got to learn to say no for the sake of your guys. How does that comment sit with you?
You know, I'll say that we're not afraid to take on a challenge. And this was a really cool project. Yes, we knew going into it, it's grueling. I mean, look at the design, right? There's no way you're looking at thinking that this isn't going to be a lot of work. And everything's taken into consideration. But it sounds to me like, you know, some people just aren't willing to take on that challenge. We are. Yeah. And I tried to talk to Ian throughout the process to kind of see where he was at. And, you know, there's definitely days he was not having fun edge banding all of these holes. It got to a point where it was like, and him and I talked about it today because we completed that screen today. Right. And we talked about it. Like, you know, there was a point where I came in a couple times to, you know, I was coming in at nights or, you know, after work and trying to edge band, trying to do this, like trying to help out where I could. And there was a couple times I came in the shop during work hours and asked Ian if I could. I was like, just leave that screen. I'll jump in. I'll do it. And, you know, I edge banded one screen, and he kind of jumped back in. He was like, I'll do the other one. Then when he was sanding them, I was like, leave those for me. I'll take care of them later. Blah blah. And he's like, no, I'll just take care of them. And when we were talking about it today, it's because he started this project, and, you know, yes, there are times where it's tough and it's not fun. Really? But like, he is passionate about it, and he remained passionate about it through the whole thing, to the extent that he wanted to finish the project. He wanted to go ahead and do all this extra work himself to get it done. Like, I tried to jump in there, but it's like, dude, I'm already like, there's this sense of fulfillment, and I think that goes along with the passion, and he never lost that throughout. So yes, it was a very challenging project, but.
And I think he did take some pride in it because he shared it on his Instagram.
Yeah, he.
Actually, I'll put his I'll throw his handle out here for it.
Yeah, this whole project was actually really fun to watch him kind of develop, because from the start he had begun doing stories on it, and he wasn't doing a whole lot of stories here prior to that. So I think he had fun. Ian, if you're watching or you see this and you didn't, let me know.
Laser Panda, I'd go the other way and say if it isn't a challenge, it's boring.
I could agree with that. Yeah. And this project is so far out of our wheelhouse. Like, it's something totally new for us, but it was super fun to be involved with and to make. Like, me and Ian stood it up at the table here earlier today, and we're just like, probably for half an hour, just taking pictures, shooting the shit about it, just like all smiles. We love this project, and it's small, right? It's nothing like
It's a one-off.
right,
It's not a
but it's like
it's not a.
it's fun, it's challenging, and it was just a good time to make. Yes, again, there was some challenging parts through it that were tough to get through, but it's done. It's a cool project, and I can't wait to get it installed.
All right, more generic questions, I think probably from your DMs. Tips for scale and proportion when designing kitchen cabinets or cabinets in general?
So, symmetry first comes to mind. That's big for me, for us here. I know that doesn't really help with scale or proportion necessarily, but keeping everything
Starting point.
100%. And then one of the first things that comes to mind is a big thing for me with like shaker cabinetry is when you're doing, let's say, a drawer bank. You have 3, 4, 5 drawers, whatever you have in that bank. So the rails and stiles, here we go with a 2.5 inch thick rail or wide rail and stile. If depending on how many drawers you have, the size of your lower drawers, because some of them get really particular size wise. If the middle center panel isn't the same size, at least the same size as my rail and stile, I make my rail and stiles 1.5 inches rather than 2.5. Usually this is just for the top. I probably wouldn't do it if it went all the way down. And people are like, well, you notice that, you see it. You don't. You would notice the scale being off of that center panel being smaller than the rail and stiles being smaller. And especially if this is a detail that you carry through, let's say, multiple drawer banks or your top pieces, so you have that line kind of continuing across there. If you have face frame cabinetry, it works really well. That's where you usually get into trouble with it, because you're narrowing your space down by having the extra rails and stiles. But in our case, we make all of our face frames 1.5 inches, so we're carrying that 1.5 inches kind of throughout, so you don't really notice it. So I think that's just little things like that, and making sure that you're kind of taking a step back and looking at the whole thing rather than hyper focusing on one particular piece. Okay. I guess that's kind of like a seeing the forest through the trees mentality, right?
Timothy JK, what are some alternatives to Rubio you like to finish unpainted cabinets with, looking for better scratch resistance?
So for all the finish that we use here, we're using a 2K poly. This is a shop applied industrial grade finish, super durable. Another good one is a conversion varnish, often referred to just as a CV finish. But again, these aren't anything like a Rubio. So other alternatives for Rubio are things like Odie's oil, which I think Ian might have behind me here somewhere. Same thing, it's a natural oil, smells great, just a couple of coats. You can kind of actually, I think he even like polishes it to a higher sheen as well. So Odie's oil is another good one, very similar to Rubio.
Where could one purchase said oils?
Online? I don't really know. I've never actually bought it.
Woodoils.com.
Probably Odie's oil, ODIES. And then another one is walrus oil. I've never actually used that one or seen anybody use it. I've just seen it online a bit. I think, again, food safe, food grade kind of oil, probably more so for cutting boards. I don't know if you would do it, any kind of cabinetry with it. Cabinetry gets tricky with wanting to do an oil, like a hand applied oil finish like that. We've done several kitchens with Rubio. It's a lot of work, kind of a pain. You have to take a lot of extra precautions with it. One of the mistakes that we made early on was when I first started here, I think it was the first kitchen that I worked on here, they used to order the doors, cabinet doors. So there was no chance to pre-prime or pre-finish the panels before assembly. So over the years, when the door starts to move and the panel starts to, shrink, and you see the a crack, not a crack, but you see the line between the style and the panel where it didn't get finished. And that's a big reason why we
do it.
Pre-prime everything, yeah. So it's a little bit tricky there in that aspect, but that wouldn't have been any different if we painted the panel. You just might actually have, a caulking joint there where it's able to flex with that, so you don't see the hard line, where with the oil, you're not getting that. So it's tricky. I would recommend a conversion varnish finish or the 2K.
How many hours went into the bubble screen?
I do not know. I have to check on that, but way more than I estimated.
That was the follow-up question.
Yep. So I don't know the exact figures. We just finished it today. I haven't looked at the total numbers, but it is far more than what I estimated. I anticipated that the edge banding the screens ended up taking like about 2.5 times longer than I expected. So we ran into a bit of a trouble there, but we caught a few things early on. We were able to speed up the process a little bit more.
You edge banded your way out of it,
You'll have to, well, I guess they're watching the edge band. We edge band our way out of the hole, huh? Jeez.
For inset doors, are your thickness of the doors the same as the face frame?
Nope.
If they're different, how does it go installing the door?
So we make all of our doors are 1 inch thick, full 1 inch thick.
Yep.
Our face frames, we make 1.1 thick. But our doors and the face of our doors and the face of the face frames are on the same plane. So basically there's a gap between the cabinet box and the door that's 1/8 inch. This is to allow, we can go a little bit smaller if we wanted to, but the hinges cover it fine. This is to allow the operation of the actual hinge. You need to have some sort of gap in there. I forget what the minimum is from the Bloom hinges that we're using, but you do require a space in there. We just bump it out to 1/8 of an inch just to make it easy for all the numbers to work. So gap between case of cabinet and door, and then same thing with, opposite with the face frame, it's flush, tied up against the actual cabinet, so 1.1 inch. And I know he's asking about inset. We're actually doing this with all of our cabinetry, whether it's inset or not. It just kind of standardizes it. Sorry, not whether it's inset or not. We're only doing it with the face frames. But it just kind of standardizing it makes it easier as we're going through the whole kitchen to do everything to one setup rather than needing to change whether it's an inset. Sometimes we offset the doors, sometimes we're partial overlay, sometimes we're full overlay, even with an inset look. So we're kind of going back and forth with the different styles, so we just streamline it and make it all one consistent standard.
Boom. I think you might have answered this. With a 1 inch thick door for full overlay, do you need to use different Bloom hinges?
Yes, so full overlay and inset require a different hinge, but the mounting plate's the same, the offset's the same. Sorry, the offset might differ on your door, but the offset from the case to the hinge plate is the same. When you're buying Bloom hinges, or if you have the Bloom catalog, and if you don't, you can just go online and download it. They lay out all of the specs to give you what those offsets need to be, what your boring distance is, what your minimum gaps are in between doors, all the information that you need. They provide in the charts with their products in their catalog.
Man, all right. Well, I think we've taken up enough of everyone's time today. We really appreciate it.
This was a long one. We came
Almost
back
a half hour.
We came back with a vengeance here.
With a bang. A lot of great questions. I think that's about it from the watch audience. But
yeah, but if you guys ever have any questions, shoot either of us a DM. Let us know. Maybe even earmark it for Revealed, and we'll make sure we showcase it here.
Yeah, be sure to stay tuned. New episodes are revealed every Wednesday. If you're watching on Instagram, NS Builders YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, Ken DeCost at Instagram. And see you guys next week.
You're not even going to give your Instagram handle?
Oh, NSB video. If you want. See Ken's bloopers.
Cool.
Behind the scenes.
See you guys. Thanks for
BTG.
watching. Enjoy your weekend.
Later.